Bullshit.
Pretend for a moment we've entered a parallel universe, free of bullshit and full of bold solutions. That's what the No BS Show is all about. I'm your host, Dave Mastovich. Our guest today is quality guru, Dr. Lisa Walters. But first, let's cut the bullshit. You've heard it. Heck, you might even say it or think it from time to time. That's not my problem. It could be related to a customer issue or a flawed work process, or another department or team member is responsible for a task or project you know isn't progressing as it should. Yet when a new idea is proposed, many people point out potential negatives or say nothing. The new approach is met with little or no support and even resistance. These and other examples make the not my problem one of the biggest roadblocks to positive change. If you're the person promoting change, present the rationale behind the idea and the metrics you will use to evaluate it. And you want to talk metrics, Dr. Walters is a big data metrics person. Remember, it's human nature to fear a loss of control or an increased workload resulting from a new process. Show how the new way helps each group impacted by the change. Communicate clearly and often. Create a sense of urgency among the troops. Point out what they lose by standing pat and what they gain by moving forward. Think beyond your immediate area to how other departments will be impacted. Acknowledge there could be challenges during the transition. Then listen to constructive feedback, but be firm with naysayers focusing only on the negatives. If you don't hear from some people, a common mistake is to misperceive their silence as support of your idea. You need to probe to find out what they really think and flesh out potential roadblocks. Your communication before, during, and after implementing the change will have as much impact on the success as the change itself. Create a communication plan prior to implementing the new approach. Work the plan. Ask for feedback. Listen and adjust based on what you learn. No problem, right? Our guest today is Lisa Walters, MT, ASCP, SBB, CQA, ASQ, MBA, PhD. What do all those letters mean? That she's pretty damn smart. She has extensive experience in CGXP auditing and consulting, including medical labs, transfusion services, tissue banking, plasma collection, and blood services. She's a faculty member of State University of New York at Fredonia and Penn State Erie Center for Continuing Education. She was the principal of Healthy Solutions Consulting and began her career in quality assurance with the American Red Cross. She's also a published author. Lisa, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, David. It's a pleasure to be here.
Full disclosure, I've known Lisa since first grade and can't remember the last time I called her Lisa since some moron gave her the nickname Ziggy way back when.
Yep, and we have the backstory on that.
Yeah, now I do.
We're not going to share it, but we have it. I ended up going into medical technology. So that was like clinical laboratory scientist. So you can do, I always used to say, if you could secrete it, I could test it. And so that's pretty much, right? So that's pretty much what I went to school for.
If you can secrete it, I can test it. Now that's a positioning statement.
I like that.
That is the line.
And so I went to Clarion for that. It is one of the top medical technology schools in the state.
Harvard, Princeton, Clarion.
And then Clarion. And then when I got out, I went into work, and I found then that I was a generalist. So I would do all the different work in all the different labs. So chemistry analysis, hematology, you name it, I did it. But I was really interested in what they call immunohematology, or the blood banking, blood science, and to use more of a simplistic term. And I really wanted to learn as much as I could about that. So I wanted to go from knowing a little about a lot to knowing a lot about maybe one area.
Okay.
So I just said I want to learn about blood banking. And so I wanted to specialize in that. Because when you're a medical technologist, you can take an exam. It's called the Board of Registry exam through the American Society of Clinical Pathologists, and you can certify then as a medical technologist. At that time, it was called an MT. They changed the names a little bit, but then you could take a specialty exam, and I wanted to take the specialty within blood banking. So I wanted to go. I went to the Red Cross in Johnstown at that time to learn as much much as I could about blood banking and work with, an individual who was probably one of the premier people in the region in blood banking. And as a result, I was able to get that specialist in blood banking. And after I did that, the Red Cross was good to me, and they promoted me into a supervisory role in the one department in the lab. And at that time, that was right when St. Francis, what is now St. Francis University, they were starting up their MBA program. And the Red Cross was very good at saying, if you want, they had a nice continuing education program, and they would pick up a certain percentage of it. So I went up and enrolled in the St. Francis MBA program and went through that program.
What years were those?
Oh my gosh. I graduated from St. Francis in 1999 or 98. So I would have been like, well, you know what? That's a lie. That's probably 94. So I would have been like 20 years old at that time.
The most important thing is that I did get my MBA before you.
Yeah, at IUP.
Yeah, and I think I did beat you in that multiplication test.
I don't think you beat me in a multiplication test ever. I would like to see evidence to that regard.
I'm going to
bring it
Mr.
now.
Killian,
Bring it now.
Mr. Killian, fourth grade.
Mr. Killian was my cousin.
Mr. Killian, that's what I was about to say. Mr. Killian was her cousin. We had the big competition for the whole school. It was the multiplication test thing. It was under tremendous pressure. I won, and her cousin, Mr. Killian, cheated to give it to her, I think. I'm not sure.
It's just a lie. Do you have any evidence to that regard?
No, I don't. However,
let's make some polynomials out right now.
Ed Killian. Let's call your cousin Ed Killian. Mr. Killian was also a football coach.
That's funny.
Big dude.
Oh my God.
Well, let me take a couple points. So when you were a generalist, you had to learn multiple tasks. Did you also manage some people at that?
Not at that time.
Okay.
Not as a generalist.
So then you move into the supervisory role, but you're also getting the specialist education,
Right.
and you had the wherewithal to take night classes at St. Francis University.
That's right.
To get your MBA 4 or 5 years after I had mine.
Right,
Okay.
after you.
Yes.
Right. Well, I don't know if it's 4 or 5 because, I don't know how good you are at addition. But anyway, so while I did that, at that time, my not to say my husband, he decided that he was going to go back to school. He was going to go for dental medicine.
Yes.
And so he moved to Pittsburgh without me. Now that I look back, maybe that was planned. Now that I look back. So what happened though with the Red Cross at that time had opportunities to get into quality management and do quality audits. And you could live anywhere to do that. So out of necessity, I was like, well, I got my MBA and I really kind of like this quality management thing. I'm going to apply for this job. And that's how I got into it. I got into quality management through that. I was able then to move to Pittsburgh. And then after years, I worked for the Red Cross as a quality auditor and really, really enjoyed it. It was a great job. Then I took a break and had my own consulting business really when my son was small. When he was just born, I took a break. And at that time is when I still wanted to, quote unquote, keep my hands bloody. So I did like accreditation
She's got
audits.
two lines already that have to make the show notes.
Okay. So I did accreditation audits for blood banks and things. And I took that opportunity to write books for the industry about quality management and things. So, and then I went back to the Red Cross for a while, and then I had the opportunity. Well, I was with the Red Cross in the quality audit position. They came to me and said, do you want to go for your PhD? We'll send you. And, the only thing is you do your dissertation on us and do the study and give us the information. And so I did that.
That's a great process.
And, but they picked it. You know what I mean? It was a decided thing. And so, I enjoyed it. It was a great opportunity. And then later than that opportunity, I started adjuncting at Fredonia State at that time, the State University of New York at Fredonia, even though we're not Ohio State, we have the there. I started adjuncting, and I adjuncted when Nicholas was little, my son was little, while I was still doing consulting work, and then the position opened for operations full-time, so I applied for that, and I was lucky enough and fortunate enough to secure that role. So that's where I am now, and so I had to kiss the Red Cross goodbye on that regard, and then I went into full-time teaching, which I just love.
The No BS Marketing Podcast with Dave Mastovich is brought to you by Mass Solutions. Put our 3-step No BS process to work for you. Visit masssolutions.biz today to take your marketing to another level. It's all about bold solutions, no BS.
It's the No BS Marketing Show. I'm your host, Dave Mastovich. That's Lisa Ziggy Zellick Walters, who I spent kindergarten through graduating high school with her in the Johnstown area growing up. And she's full of energy and activity, and also humble. In the midst of that conversation, she's like, "Yeah, I wrote books for." Like, didn't even bring it up as didn't even bump it as a book, just like it was nothing. So tell us about some of the writings you've done.
Okay, so I did the books that I wrote. I was like a contributing author, and then I coordinated a group of really talented people to maybe write specific chapters, and then I was the overall editor of those books.
Good.
See, because it occurred to me when I would go out and do these accreditation reviews that you know how healthcare is. I don't have to tell you. It's like you need to do these things, but we don't have any money to educate you, to send you. You know what I mean?
Yes.
It's hard.
Yes.
Resources are tight. So we would go out and we do these accreditation reviews of blood banks and transfusion services, and they were all doing technically the right things. They were doing, everything was technically correct, but they didn't understand the idea of setting strategic goal, strategic initiative, goals, objectives. They didn't really necessarily do that. They didn't know how to monitor their data. They didn't know how to do how to evaluate job descriptions and training. And so those are they'd be like ISO 9001. I don't know if you guys have marked. Okay, like that, like a quality system. They didn't So we as in blood banking industry roll out standards that look a lot like the ISO standards, but no one really knows the heck is this ISO standard thing. What is it? So it occurred to me that, geez, everywhere we go, these people are doing the right things and working really hard at doing the right things, but they really didn't have that foundation, And so I said, I want to write a book on it. I want to get a group of people. I'll write a lot of it, and then I'll get some experts in, and we'll put a book in the American Association of Blood Banks, which is now the organization formerly known as PRINCE, like AABB. Okay, they kind of changed the name of it. So it's now known as the AABB. I approached them, the AABB Press, and pitched the proposal to them, and they said go for it. So we put the book together, and it was called Introducing the Big Q, a
What
basic
year was
quality
that?
primer. That would have been let's see, that was early on. So my son was pretty small. So 2004.
That's
around.
impressive.
And then, so we put that out, and then what came on the scene was Six Sigma. Everything was Six Sigma, and still is Six Sigma. And that's when I fell in love with data. Although, you had referred about the data analytics, I'm not a data scientist by any stretch. There were people that are. I was humbled last week. I was at a conference, and I never saw so many smart people in my life. All I wanted to do is say, "Look, I have a pretty purse." You know what I mean? They were so smart, But that's when I fell in love with. I got exposed to the American Society for Quality, which is a international quality organization, and I met all these data engineers, and they were doing this Six Sigma thing. I was like, this is fabulous. I got to get in on this, And they were making improvements in their organizations, saving $250,000. And, I was like, how do we do all this? So then then I got another group of people together, did another proposal for the AABB Press, and we called it Simple Six Sigma. And so we wrote a book on that, put that together, and then, the blood banks and transfusion services, they really started to get a hold of this. Very smart people, obviously. They're very smart people doing this kind of stuff. And so it was then time to ramp it up. So after we introduced the Big Q, the last book we did was called Romancing the Q, because you can go ahead and meet the Q, but you have to really marry it. And we called it Dancing with the Quality Gorilla, right? Because you don't sit down when you get tired, you sit down when the gorilla gets tired.
I like the creativity and making something that could just be a staid subject, and you turn it into something a little bit more interesting and a little compelling. Talk about writing those books, because it's an arduous process to put a book together.
Oh, because everybody has conflicting time frames, and then everybody has a different voice. So I did have the advantage of being the one that was going to write the majority of it. But then I would get the books back or the chapters back, and then I would put it in my own voice. So I wanted the books all to be the kind of book like the phone rings. Of course, nobody does that anymore. The phone doesn't ring. They're like, what is that when they hear the noise? They don't understand that you're supposed to pick it up.
Yes.
So the phone, so the phone rings and you pick it up, and your friend over there says, I'm looking at a control chart and it says this. What does this mean? So it's you talking to a friend. So the books are written in that voice that I'm talking to you.
Yes.
And I'm explaining to you what all of this stuff means. This is what change management is. This is what validation is. And I'm explaining it to you in very a conversational language, so that you feel, in fact, so when you read it, like, because you've known me for a long time, you should almost feel like you
I
can
hear your
me.
voice.
Yeah,
that's
like
how I
the
feel
little
with my book.
one-liners.
Yes,
you know
with
what
my book, my goal of my book is that someone that knows me reading that should hear my little voice inside their little head.
And smile about it.
And
like,
smile about it.
and smile about
So
it.
I have
And
to,
so I
so I have
you
to
know
ask
exactly
Suzanne,
what I mean.
can you imagine
If we wrote
the
a book.
teachers going through this every class, competing for the comedy? Both of us comedians.
Yet both whip smart, you know?
Yeah,
so.
Well, smarter than every one of those teachers at 13.
Exactly, like every
Except
13-year-old
Mr. Coble.
is.
Except Mr. Coble.
Who is, Mr. Coble.
He was really smart. Miss Shevers, she has a legacy. She was our English teacher, and all these people wrote. My brother's a full-time writer. You wrote. I wrote. All these people were writers from
Give
this
her
little
credit.
school. She did a good job.
Head
So
of
I
her
was
time.
teasing. We thought we were smarter than all those teachers.
right.
And we were smarter than probably half of them.
Right. But it is true. But I will say that I do defer because I might have been funny, but nobody's that funny. Nobody's as funny as David. You know, nobody. So
David.
She's one of like 4 people to call me David. She
David.
did all of our life call me David, but my high school basketball coach and my college basketball coach and my father-in-law and her call me David. And of course my mom.
That's the way
of course
I met
my mom.
you, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, and that's why.
And that's why I call you Zig. That's the way I met.
That's because you made me.
Yeah, I heard the story.
She'll
Not
give you
nice.
the story nice, yeah.
There you go. So the story was, I don't even know what it is. Forget it. It was nice. It
But
was nice.
anyway,
We'll
so
leave it
that's
at
the
that.
way we write it, right? We write the book. So those are like the industry publications. And then, of course, then I have to do, as in Fredonia, required to do like more academic type of writing, which is a whole different animal.
Yes.
And was hard to kind of get a hold of. So my research interest, though, is compliance, as well as how you, in Six Sigma methodology implementation. So like students will do Six Sigma projects, and then maybe we'll collect data on how well they learned it. Did that help them learn operations more? That kind of thing.
So we're talking with our guest today, Dr. Lisa Walters. I know her as Ziggy. So I'm going to say all these letters, and you have to tell me what these mean. MTASCPSBB.
Okay, medical technologist through the American Society of Clinical Pathology with a specialist in blood banking.
CQASASQ.
Certified quality auditor through the American Society for Quality.
MBA that I got after Dave.
Right.
Okay. PhD that I beat Dave to.
Called Higher and
I don't think he's going to get. I don't think he's going to catch me on this. Okay, so going through all this stuff, we like to ask people if they've had any mentors, other than their parents, any mentors that impacted you and how it might help our audience.
It's funny because I don't necessarily consider him a mentor, but he is somebody that did influence my life, and that's David Cobaugh.
Okay.
And I'm remiss because I always say, I'm going to write him a letter someday. I'm going to write David Cobaugh a letter.
We're going to send him a link to this because he emailed me once.
If you can.
I will.
Because to me, David Cobaugh, to this day, I use what he called the system to show kids how to like change from units to units.
I wasn't
do
listening
all that
during
time.
that
Well,
class.
I'll show you later after. I'll show you Avogadro's number.
He paddled me a couple of times.
Yeah, well, deservedly, probably. Hey, back in the day, you can get away with it.
He paddled well. Your cousin could really paddle. Yeah, Mr. Killian could paddle.
Oh, yeah.
I still all call them Mr. I see them call him Mr.
know,
and they're like,
I know.
They're like, dude, you're
It's okay. We're good now. We're good now.
But Kobo could paddle.
Yeah,
he had
he
the
could.
long paddle, but
Yeah.
Killian went with the smaller paddle.
Yeah.
And then there was like Samala tried paddling. And he paddled me, and I said, "That's it."
Yeah, really. You better
That's
go
it?
up there and train with David Cobaugh.
And let's see who else. Those were the main ones. Palumbo. He passed
Oh, my
away. He
gosh.
passed away, but he could kick ass.
Oh,
on it.
yeah.
Palumbo could kick ass with his paddle. His was also a thin one, a thick one, like Mr. Killian. See, the long, thin one was Mr. Coball's.
Yeah, he was good because he was a chemist and he understood. You know what I mean? Like, he understood measurement and you know what I mean? And the impact.
He was also the only left-hander.
That's right.
And it made a difference on the angle because John Poliak, who I spoke to yesterday,
Oh my
and I
gosh.
would compete, and we kept track, and I kept track. I had a little notepad that kept track of me, John Poliak, and Rich Britton.
Rich Britton.
And I would win going away. I got paddled 172 times
my
junior
gosh.
year. It was absurd.
That's
and they were
awesome.
like 113, 111, and I would taunt them. I go, I'm kicking your ass by getting my ass paddled.
It's funny that you say that about David Cobaugh because he used to write on the board with one hand and he'd be erasing with the other.
Yes, it was impressive.
It's
I do remember that. I don't remember anything about the chemistry class, but I
yeah.
remember the paddling. and that his neck would get red when he was mad.
Yeah, well, mostly, from you, yeah. But like, if he would say, remember, a day without chemistry is a day without sunshine.
Yes.
And I teach that to my operations students. If I come into my classroom, I always say, a day without operations, and they'll say, is a day without sunshine. And I got that from him because it just sets the, like, you should love this.
He was a mentor. Okay.
He was just so smart. I wanted to be like him. And he taught us so much, like how to study in college, all these things. I really owe a lot to him. And then at Clarion, I had mentors. Like Mrs. Donikai was my advisor. She was wonderful. I had Dr. Beck. Now he has passed away, but he's the one that said to me, you need to go to graduate school. You know what I mean? He encouraged me. And took time to do that. I think now, as I'm a professor, I think people are like, oh my gosh, how do you have this kind of time? They took time.
Yes.
And I don't forget that they did that. And in my MBA, which I got recently, really after you.
Yes.
Okay. So there were Dr. Dennis McElnay, who is now retired from St. Francis, but he was one of those professors that anything they said was gold, right?
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? It's like he had that way about him, and boiling down to no nonsense, and just a great guy. And so those are like taught me about organizational behavior in a way that like opened my eyes. It was like the aha moment, his class. Then in professionally, when I said I went to the Red Cross because I wanted to study with, I wanted to work with, a great thinker in this area. Her name was Nancy Steffi.
Okay.
And she's recently retired in the last few years, but she took me under her wing. She said I was the hyperactive daughter she never had. And still, we call her Yoda because she's so smart about transfusion. And I learned so much from her. And if I didn't work with her, I would never have gotten my specialist in blood banking. There's no way. So she was just fabulous. And then, like, from the quality aspect, my one colleague, and Bob Baer, he was like one of those once in a lifetime bosses.
Yes.
He taught me so much about quality auditing and quality. And then there was a guy up in Erie, Tony Salvia. He is a professor emeritus at Penn State. He taught me about data, and from Six Sigma, there's a gentleman recently retired from Lord Corporation, Jerry Sobrowski. These are the people that really taught me a lot about quality and data. Now at Fredonia, I have a couple people that help me, and like my chairperson, Mo Siadian. There's another professor, Linda Hall, who's a quintessential professor. She's just fabulous, accounting professor. But she's taught me how to, find publications, and Moj has actually helped me write, and then I'm now recently in data analytics, Dr. Renetta Barneva. She's teaching me more about data analytics than.
But see, the great thing about it is here you are, a PhD, you've achieved all these accolades, and you're still talking about how you're learning on a daily basis from not one, not two, but 10 people. Right. And that's what's huge about personal growth, is understanding that you can learn from anybody.
Oh, everybody has something to teach.
Okay, so let's go to the BS stuff. We've all seen it, or I often joke, smelled it. BS in the workplace. Give me an example that could be a company culture, questionable leadership, poor work ethic, a time when you just had to say, that's BS.
In one of my professional roles, and I won't go into too much, you know what I mean? We as a whole organization should have been working toward one end, but we had a lot of silos, and as a person that had the MBA before me, that's inappropriate, right? You know what I mean? That we should all be pulling together for these same goals. And again, I think about how Dr. McElnay always used to say, this is what it says in a book, but this is the reality that what you're going to see. And it was so true. There were all these different silos. So we would give them, our role was to provide an analysis about maybe the current state of the process or of a system. And it would be like giving it to one of the political pundits of today. And you would give it to them, and you would say, basically what you're saying by the data say your baby is ugly. And they would come back and say, actually, it's quite unique. And so what you're telling me is that this is the percentage that's wrong, but what about the percentage that's right? And let's spin it to our outside accreditors that way. So there was a lot of like spinning, so much so that you would get to the point where the spinning was believing. And so we were convincing ourselves that we were in a much better place than where we were. And I would get angry. So we would do a lot of meetings like this, like where, maybe I'd call in, a lot of virtual meetings. And I began to be like nasty in these meetings or very short in these meetings, or to the point where I would, they would ask me a question on the data and I would say, well, there it is. Can't you interpret it? You know what I mean? Or maybe you should interpret it because you obviously know more about it than me, and it wasn't good. It wasn't healthy. I like one of the days of those meetings, I'd be like sick in my stomach, those kinds of things. And but it got to the realization that I either had to get congruent with that or I had to maybe move away from that. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean?
What'd you do?
I moved away from it and let it be because it wasn't, the culture was so ingrained. There was nothing that could be done. There's not one person. You could try,
Yes.
You go in optimistic, like, ooh, little Susie Sunshine,
Yes.
look what I found. I found this. Ooh, isn't this exciting? And they're like, no, it's not exciting at all,
Exactly.
And you're like, well, I'm telling you something that we can correct. I don't care.
So for your health, you have to move on.
Yes.
And that's important for our listeners. That's Dr. Lisa Walters on the No BS Show. And I want to make sure our listeners remember that the show is brought to you by audible.com. If you're not using Audible, give it a try. And we're going to give you a free trial for 30 days and get a free book on Audible at audible.com/trial no BS. Wait, I might have messed that up, Suze.
audibletrial.com/no-BS.
audibletrial.com/no BS.
True confession, I downloaded mine this weekend for a road trip I was taking. I downloaded the new Anderson Cooper book. Awesome.
Nice.
Isn't Audible awesome when you're driving?
Awesome.
And so then that's going to help Mass Solutions. Thank you very much. So get your free Audible trial through Mass Solutions, and we'll have that on the show notes as well. And you'll get to listen to more of our conversation with Dr. Lisa Walters in